Hey there, Claudia. So let's take a look at the new set of essays you've sent us. Let's see what you wrote. Nowadays, a few people take their family with them abroad when they go on a business trip. Is this positive or negative? Okay. So, 1, 2, 3, 4 paragraphs. Fine. All right. I don't know why it's doing this weird thing here, but that's not a big deal. So, experts throughout both. Change your word order. Experts throughout both the developing and developed world, I don't know what happened to the word world here, have debated, ed, whether traveling with families or leaving, ing, because look, whether, then you've got ing here, so this also has to be ing. Whether traveling with families or leaving them at home has, because when it's an or, you need a singular verb. It should be has a greater impact on our life. This essay will discuss both issues using some examples from the Spanish government and Oxford University to demonstrate the negative aspect with some points and proof arguments. All right, that's awkward. I understand what you're trying to do. You're trying to slide in there that you're more in favor of the negatives than you are the positives, but the way you did it just doesn't really entirely work. So let's try that differently. This essay will discuss why the negative aspects are stronger, with some examples from the Spanish government and Oxford University to demonstrate points and prove arguments. Do you see how it works better that way? We're doing the same thing. We're combining the two sentences, but grammatically it's more correct. So let's move on. On one hand, there is ample evidence that since many people are traveling every week for work reasons and the requirement of taking their families is becoming a necessity, especially if, no. You don't need the since here. Get rid of the since because it requires you to have a different sentence structure. On one hand, there is ample evidence that many people are traveling every week for work reasons, and the requirement of taking their families is becoming a necessity, especially if they have children. The central reason behind this is twofold. Firstly, people receive without the S, positive without the S, inputs without the S while traveling, which allows you to acquire some special skills such as cultural knowledge or capacity to adapt in different situations. What does that mean? What are positive inputs? So this is really confusing. It's most certainly an expression that requires some further development. You need to explain to us what these positive inputs are, what you mean by that word, and then just go into more detail. Like, for example, if A, B, C, D, E, then it makes sense that one might want their family with them. All right? That's what you need to include here. Secondly, when parents are working, the children become independent, creating new relationships with people that they are not used to. So wait a minute. Is this relevant when a person is working abroad? You need to be more specific here. Hence, they improve the expression and language skill. All right, again, I'm not really following you because you haven't really attached it to the idea of this essay. So when parents are working abroad, children become more independent by creating new relationships with people that they are not used to. As a result, they improve language skills and their communication. No, how about this? They improve their communication and language skills. That makes sense. And then you can get into an example. For example, recent empirical research from the Spanish government has shown that the best marks in the national exam was from the students who usually traveled when they were young. Therefore, it is conclusively clear that having some experience abroad has a positive impact on our behavior and contributes to be more open-minded. Fine. So, moving on. On the other hand, although there is a case for traveling abroad with do it a little differently. On the other hand, although traveling abroad with people's families seems to be a perfect solution, it could be the case that the worker does not have enough time to spend with them. This is largely because some workers are investing many hours in their job. For instance, an extensive study by Oxford University has explained that the employees who had their families with them were less efficient than the others due to the fact that they were not focused, ed, only on their work. Consequently, it is possible to state beyond doubt that the largest drawback is the work efficiency and the possibility that your family becomes as a preoccupation instead of a satisfaction. All right, now as far as an essay, as a development is concerned, I liked it. And it's on topic too, so I like this paragraph really considerably. Okay, Claudia, so nice job. From the arguments and examples given, I firmly believe that for short work trips, S, taking your family has a negative personal impact. Not a negative personal. I think you're really saying it has a negative professional impact. That's what I understood. Especially on your work. That is the main purpose of the trip. Additionally, the family is not receiving the attention they require. So basically, you should have added one more thing here. So if you're trying to kill two birds with one stone, this effort basically is a failed attempt. I mean, you need to say something a little better here, a little more conclusive. So some people try to kill two birds with one stone. They try to mix business with pleasure, but in the end, both suffer. So I think this is really the takeaway, and this is the message that you were actually trying to say. I just think you needed to do a better job of doing that. All right? So on the whole, it was good, but there were some areas that I wanted you to work on. So let's take a look now at your rainfall line graph. The line graph illustrates, no, don't put an apostrophe after rainfall. The line graph illustrates the fluctuation in rainfall in 3 states in the UK throughout 2018. No, you put an S when we talk about a decade, throughout the 2020s, throughout the 2010s, throughout the 2000s, but not with 1 year. The key information that stands out from a comparison of the 3 states is that the rainfall dramatically changed every month. Active voice. Whereas the lowest point was in Scotland in February, the peak was reached in Wales and Scotland in July and October, respectively. A closer examination of the fluctuations, England was the steadiest, with a difference between the highest and lowest point of 50 ml. The most significant increase was about 100 ml in March by Scotland. Nevertheless, there was a steady rainfall period from August to October in Wales. From an overall perspective, there was not a special trend between the 3 parts of the UK during this year. Notwithstanding the number of milliliters was changing every month, the average for the year was roughly the same for the UK. All right, you've really taken this holistically and have given us very little specific detail. Why do I say that? Because here you talk about the lowest point in Scotland, you talk about the peak in Wales. Peak was reached in Wales and Scotland in July and October. So I don't understand. Does this 125 apply to these 2 countries in these 2 months? It's just not clear. It's really rather bizarre and rather vague. You talked about England's lowest point. So let's see how many figures we have here. 1, 2, no, so 1, and then 2, 3, 4, presumably, and then, all right, so check it out. This is what I'm trying to do. If you look at this line graph, you can see that effectively you have 36 data points. Why do you have 36? Because you have 1 year over 3 different areas. So a total of 36 data points. You cannot and should not mention all 36, but there are some data points that are absolutely more important than others, and that's what I want to talk about. What are they? When you have a line graph like this, it's essentially a story. It's telling you what happens from the beginning of the year, it tells you what the important parts are in the middle of the year, and then it tells you the end of the story, which is that end of the year. So if I were going to do this line graph, I would probably start with Scotland because that's the highest beginning figure. I would talk about this beginning, January. I would talk about this lowest point, February. I would talk about 2 peaks, 1, 2. I would talk about fluctuation. I would use the word fluctuation. And then I would talk about the end. Okay, so essentially what am I talking about? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 points for Scotland. Okay? And I just say that the rest of the year was marked by considerable fluctuation. For England, I would talk about 1, this part in January. I would talk about the low here. And then I would talk about 3 peaks, 1, 2, 3, which is also your end point. So again, 5 points. If I were going to talk about Wales, I would talk about the beginning, of course, in January. 1, 2, this low point. 3, this peak. 4, this interesting plateau, because it's the only plateau you see in this chart. And then 5. Wait, what did I say? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, so 5 points again. So essentially, you're really only analyzing 15 points out of 36. That's why I would have done it. That's why I would have organized it. The paragraphing really depends on you, whether you want to talk about Scotland and England in one paragraph or how you want to divide those. But that's how I would do it. Those are the really key points. There are lots of other ways to do it. Some people decide to do it by splitting the year in half, and that's another way. Oops, I just did something silly. So you could do it like that. You could talk about the first half of the year and talk about those data points that I just suggested, and then the second half of the year and those data points. But personally, I like talking about just England, just Scotland, just Wales. I think it's cleaner that way. So take this all into consideration. Think about it. Think about how you want to organize it and how you would correct this. Okay? Go ahead and correct it, and let's see more work from you, Claudia. All right? Good job.